This is NDTV, and you're watching NDTV Profit.
Hello everyone and welcome to this extremely special session. It's being called India's greatest asset, a demographic dividend that's going to come from a time when 25% of the world's workforce will actually be Indian. There are others who say that this could potentially become a nightmare if it's not handled properly, if India cannot nurture its talent pool, if it cannot ensure that its workers have the skills that will really be required. So which way is it going to go is perhaps the single most important question facing the Indian economy right now. And we have an absolutely fantastic panel to take us through every aspect of this. I'm going to start, I'm going to go right to left if I like. Rajendra, Pawar, great to have you with us. Chairman of the NIIT group, fantastic that you could be with us. And next to you is Mr. Chandrasekaran, who's the CEO of TCS. So two of the giants of the IT field to tell us what it is that you require and what you would like the government to do. And sitting next to you, of course, the person who has all the answers, Mr. Kapil, Sibal, who wears so many hats in the government that, but in this particular capacity, sir, I think it's your role as the Minister for HRD that is particularly important, and maybe communications and IT and the others as well. But it's great that you could be with us. Joerres is the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the ManpowerGroup, which can tell us what it is that you think India needs to do or needs to change. Rajiv Khandelwal is the co-founder and executive director of Ajivika, who's done a lot of work with migrants and migrant labor, and can perhaps tell us how you think, what it is that they really require to be able to be a more effective workforce. And finally, the person who certainly has the coolest job among all of us out here is Mr. Fadia, who's an ethical hacker. Before I actually dive into the subject, won't you just expound on that? What exactly is an ethical hacker?
So ethical hacking is when a company hires you and gives you permission to hack into the systems, and then you do a security audit and then submit a report saying that, hey, these are your problems and this is how you can fix them.
Okay, so now we've got your job description out of the gentleman to my immediate left are both looking stunned that somebody would actually do that. But it's great, Ankit, that you could be with us. But Mr. Sibal, let me just turn directly to the major question that we have. We are calling this India's biggest asset, and I think many people feel that it is. 25% of the workforce is going to be Indian. It should be good news. Will we be able to train them and give them the skills that they really require to be able to deliver?
Well, you know, that's what we're working towards. Well, let me just give you a global perspective and a national perspective. If you really look at the world, say 2020, the average age of an Indian would be 29. The average age of a Chinese and an American would be 37. The average age of a person in Western Europe would be 45. The average age of a person in Japan would be 47. So what you're looking at, one, is a global opportunity, because in the years to come, 30% of the global workforce, because of this advantage, would be manned by Indians. So there is one, a global opportunity. Then there's a national opportunity, and those opportunities are at different levels. Our economy is such that we have to develop different kinds of skills which cater to our own economic growth interests. So we can't really acquire the skills of the Western world, but we need to actually hone our skills to match the economic opportunities in India. And so this problem has to be tackled at various levels. One, we need to actually integrate education into skill development. So you need a national vocational education qualification framework based on industrial standards, output standards, outcome standards, which industry must actually set for us. Then we need to prepare a curriculum to be able to ensure that the outcomes of students when they get out of school or college, actually they have acquired those standards, right? So we are in the process for the last almost 2 years actually working on this, and as of 2012 we'll be launching the National Vocational Education Qualification Framework with the Skills Development Councils and the National Skill Mission. The objective being that by 2022, when India will be 75, we should have 500 million skilled people in this country and 200 million graduates. C.K. Prahlad said that if India can't do this, we'll not be able to get the double-digit growth that we dream about. That's really the biggest challenge facing our country. And the difference between the developed world and the developing world is precisely this. The developed world, for every 100 children, young people in the age group of 18 to 24, have at least 40 out of every 100 going to college. India has 15, right? And India's skill requirement annually is 9 million. We have capacity to deliver only 2 million. This is the big challenge, and we need to all collaborate with each other to make the challenge. We can give the policy direction, but the challenge has to be delivered by the private sector.
Right. Mr. Joerres, when you look at India, do you see it as a big global opportunity in terms of the workforce? Is this going to be the workforce that's going to be powering global growth, or are there, as Mr. Sibal said, major challenges before that can happen?
There's tremendous opportunity, and it particularly has to do with the history. And what I mean by that is if you look at what happened in 2001 and 2002, there was a flee to India because of the education levels, because of the English skills, all of the things that many companies were looking to do, and frankly because of a large labor arbitrage. So there was a labor arbitrage with great skills. Here we are 6, 7, 8, 9 years later, and the world is still looking for that, but are now seeing that, in fact, the large groups that did extremely well in supplying that kind of skill and labor, when you now want to add and go to the next level down, the university systems, the technical college systems are getting much more stressed than ever before. So the multinationals, for one, are looking at it and saying, we'd love India to be the place to go. We're getting a little bit nervous about getting to that next level of student, that student who can matriculate through the university and really add the skills, while industry itself is getting more and more complicated exponentially. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is to keep up with that next wave, that next 3 to 5 years, because the history has been great, but can you maintain that kind of momentum?
Mr. Sibal, you want to respond to that? Do you think it's at next level where the challenge is for you as well?
That too. I think it is at all levels, because really when you're talking about vocation and skills, the children in class 9, 10, 11 and 12 must start acquiring them and getting exposed to them as they move up. Then only will you build a generation of skilled people in the years to come. So whereas what he's saying is absolutely right, but I think we need to start much earlier. But coming to the point that he has made, I think already industry is preparing the workforce for that level that he's talking about. For example, Infosys trains 100,000 engineers on an annual basis, right? Because they know that engineers, when they come out of engineering schools, don't have the skills. Wipro has started a 10X program, wherein by 2020 they'll be preparing 10,000 faculty people in the various colleges around the country to give skills to faculty. That's what Wipro is doing. A lot of Educom and other companies are actually moving forward and setting up skill development centers to be able to do that. So actually Indian industry is preparing for the challenge that he is talking about. How quickly and how well that can be done will depend on market forces, will depend on demand, which also depend on global demand, right? And I think that we're too obsessed with the IT sector. This panel itself, 4 or 5 of them are from the IT sector. But the IT sector is not the world, right? So we need a lot of skills in a lot of diverse sectors, including agriculture, pharmaceuticals, leather, textiles. And what we are doing is we're trying to build these oases of vocational training centers, schools and polytechnics where the industry is located. If it's Ludhiana, it has to be textiles. If it's Pune and Chennai, it has to be automobiles. If it is other stuff, it has to be Moradabad. So I think we need a diverse strategy worked out at the national level, the state level and the local level in diverse areas of skill development.
Okay, let me now jump straight to the IT sector because we do have 2 of the giants sitting here with us. Mr. Chandrasekaran, how would TCS be responding to the challenges there? And is it really becoming one of your biggest headaches, finding enough skilled people to keep taking in?
Before I answer the question, let me step back. And I don't think it's only an opportunity. I think it is a global need. I think Ministry gave a number of statistics, but if you just translate it, in the next 10 years, we are going to be producing some 136 million graduates. and China is going to do 23 million. That means they're going to do 6 times output, and United States is going to do only 11 million. Unless or otherwise all these people are properly educated, skilled and trained, it's not a question of whether we will capture the opportunity. I don't think the need of all countries in the globe for talent will be met. So an Indian graduate will not necessarily work on opportunities in India. They may be working anywhere in the world. So I think it's a global need more than an opportunity. It has to happen. That's the way I look at it. Second, if you look at the levels at which the gaps are there, I think you have to look at 3 levels. One is at the level that we can do enough research. So I think we have a huge problem in generating PhDs in this country. I think that's an area we need to focus so that we can address the actual research requirements, because Indian companies going forward will have a lot more capacity to be able to invest in research than they've had in the past, and we should be able to have enough research people. The second level, where we are talking about the IT sector, the knowledge workers. While there are challenges, the IT sector has shown that it can scale. I mean, companies like us recruit tens of thousands of people on a quarterly basis. Last quarter, we recruited 20,000 people. And as an industry, we recruit something like 250,000 graduates a year to be able to train, absorb, and deploy them. Is something that has been proven, but the models have to change. And the next level is the vocational training. That's where Minister made reference to different sectors. And we need carpenters, we need building workers, construction workers, and all those skills cannot be generated in the traditional way in which we've been doing it. So that brings to the third point that I want to make. A huge technology intervention is required. Because if you really talk about teachers, the estimated shortage is some 400,000 teachers. I mean, you're not going to hire and train and equip 400,000 teachers. So I think today morning, even Sam Petroda made a comment saying that teachers have to take on the role of mentors and technology have to play the role of enabling education. So I think it is possible, but we need to think differently.
Pawar, let me get your opening thoughts, if you like, on all of this, and also the point that was just made about using technology to really help spread those levels of skills. Is that something you see happening more and more? I mean, NIIT has been trying it for a long time, but in computers, could it happen elsewhere as well?
So first of all, I think population is surely an asset. I have no doubt in my mind that this will play out well, and play out well for a couple of reasons in my view. One, I think in one sector at least we've been able to demonstrate it, which is in IT. And it's not just the use of technology. I think that's going to be important. That will make a difference in all fields. But it's also innovation in how you build these capabilities. We've seen extensive innovation within our sector of how to deal with the talent shortage problem. So now coming to the second part of what role technology is playing, it's playing an important role. It will play a much bigger role. So imagine when we have broadband at the panchayat level. Imagine when we have interfaces which go beyond iPad. So the ease of engaging with information and the speed at which you will get it and the cost at which you will get it, the whole infrastructure for the younger generation is coming into shape. Now we know that the country is being able to get every child into school. That has been established. Now the task is to hold them in the class, which is what is being done, and then get ready for the time they come into higher education. And I think, as the Minister rightly said, it's not necessary that everybody goes from class 1, 2, 3, 4, 12 into year 1, 2, 3, 4. To stream out those who are interested to start a vocation after class 10, let them be there for a few years and work and come back again. There are some structural changes which are being done which were not possible earlier. Earlier, if you dropped out of school, you could never get back into higher education. So these structural changes which create opportunity to exit after class 10, work for some time, get back in, get an equivalence of the skills for a degree, those structural changes, the underlying platform of technology and the kind of, I see this children in school as a huge train full of millions which are coming out of that system, and we're going to create multiple tracks for them and give them equivalence for skills. And those who go on in education directly will do so, others will come back into education. So I am actually very, very optimistic that we have proven models at work. We have a lot of reform and policy change which is on the anvil. So, and it's already gone beyond IT. We've looked at the financial sector where tens of thousands of people are coming through the non-formal sector, the BPO sector. Now we look at retail, we look at healthcare, we look at hospitality. In the services sector itself, a dozen odd sectors where they need 2 lakh people a year. Today it's possible to deliver that. So I personally see this as an easy thing to solve.
Mr. Sibal, the point which is partly being made out there is that when somebody drops out of school or says, okay, I'm going to try and get a vocational degree instead of becoming a graduate from college, and we have so many people just lining up, and that's why you have the 100% cutoffs in some of the Indian universities. Is that something which you will overcome the social stigma that might be involved in, I'm not going into college and doing vocational training instead?
No, it's the market that will play itself out. If the market will give to that particular kid, be it a boy or a girl, enough of a compensation as he moves away from class 10, automatically society will start accepting it, right? And I think ultimately that has to be done over years. It's not going to happen overnight, but I'm sure it will happen. But let me come back to the point that was made earlier on technology. I think that technology has to play a very, very important role in this transformation. We are in the process of actually connecting through the National Knowledge Network almost all the universities in India. There are 604 of them will be connected in the next 3-4 years, fully connected. Then we are taking the fiber optic network and connecting 250,000 gram panchayats, which we want to actually lay the network for in the next 2 years. And then the last mile connectivity will be through wireless broadband. And this will all be, then you can imagine how 3G will work itself out. I mean, you will have e-health, you will have education. In fact, then the Akash, which is launched by me just recently, will become the platform for all delivery of all public services in India. From the rural sector. So you can imagine if you want to pay your taxes, if you want to get your refund, if you want to get your passport, if you want to pay your electricity bill, if you want to start your pump in the field without having to go there, everything will be done through electronic means. This will be a wholly transformational process. And let me tell you this, in the last 20 years, and this is really the great advantage that the global community has, in the last 20 years, communication, individuals sought out information. But for the first time in the history of mankind, it is information that is seeking out individuals. And that's the process of empowerment. If I have a host of information in my hand, it will lead to innovation automatically because I'll play around with that information. But what we need to do is empower that kid with that information.
And that tablet is going to be hitting people very soon in large numbers.
The version 2 will have 800 megahertz processor. It will have a much more life, a battery which will be about at least 8 hours. Without power you can function. So there are lots more features in version 2. And in fact, this is not just for the children of India. I think we need to think globally. This is for the children of the world. And what was nano was to the automobile sector, the tablet is for the IT sector.
All right, Mr. Khandewal, let me just ask you, do you think the technological changes that we're talking about are actually going to make a difference on the ground, or is it still a long way away?
I guess one has to take a more nuanced view. There is a segment of the labor market in which it will certainly have an impact. But let's look at very large numbers, Vikram. Let's look at, for example, the construction sector. 40 million people are in the construction sector. We have unique labor markets like head loading. There are 7.5 million head loaders in this country. There are 18 million domestic workers. There are 8 million brick kiln workers. There are large numbers of people in small manufacturing, informal manufacturing kind of spaces, most of whom are from areas like eastern UP, northern Bihar, Jharkhand, western Odisha, southern Rajasthan, where I come from, western Madhya Pradesh, Bundelkhand, areas of pockets of poverty that are driving people out, and they constitute very large numbers in the labor market. Now, their technology is necessary, I guess, but not a sufficient solution. And there we have to consider aspects that will help people retain a better protected and secure niche in the labor market. Otherwise, not only do we have a situation of early entry, from where I come, average age of first entry is 15 years. Okay, that's because of very high dropouts from schools. But the average age of return is 28 years. So by the time, that is the time because an unskilled worker cannot last longer in the urban market. So there are labor market kind of conditions which need to be changed in favor of workers so that they're incentivized to stay longer and be skilled and not be just consumed, as manual, informal, casual workforce of the economy.
Mr. Joerres, when you're looking at the various aspects of Indian industry, when you talk to industry, for example, where do they face the biggest problems? Is it at the top level, management and CEOs and CFOs? Is it at the middle management level? Is it at the level of shop floor workers? Where's their biggest problem?
It's a great question, and I'm not being cynical about it. It's at all levels. It's to the point now where if you talk to one client, they're saying, I need better managers and executives. In Hyderabad, they need to have better manufacturing skills because they're moving in. What I would say is that technology is a fantastic thing and can be a huge enabler. But we also have to look at the outcomes of what are they getting when they get through the other side of this, and how can India leapfrog and not get trapped into some of what happened in the Western world, which was bring them through an episodic set of university training or technical college training, and at the end the businesses say, my business says my requirements have moved. And there's some iterative process back and forth, a good relationship between business and government and education that can make it a much more higher level of efficacy. So I would say when you look at the movement into various industries, as the minister was talking about, it's a plethora of different industries that also then means it's a plethora of different skills. And the global world is saying, I want it. Please deliver it to me, but I'm a little suspect because when I get there, I have a hard time. I also would say that there are some elements about reducing the number of turnover and attrition within companies, because companies will have a much better sense, and Wipro and Infosys does a great job in training. But some of the companies we talk to are nervous about putting large training programs in because the attrition rate is so high. And I think that some of those things have to be worked on as well.
Mr. Chandrasekaran, is that something that would worry you? That you train people too much, they're going to leave you anyway?
No, I think if you look back the history of TCS, we have always trained. I think we've trained the industry. And I think that our attitude and approach has always been, you train and it is good for the industry, and we continue to train. And that's in one area I think we invest, and most of the IT companies invest.
Mr. Pawar, you want to add to that?
Well, I would say that people have choices, and at least this younger generation, last 5 or 7 years, people who were teenagers in the golden period of the 90s, they value jobs that give them in-service training. And that's very high on the agenda. So actually, if you invest in training, your attrition rates are lower. There's evidence to that. So it's good to do in general, but I think it's very good for a company as well.
Ankit, let me just get you in on the question of technology and young people. I mean, young people in general are in love with technology, they're really good at it. It's hardwired into their DNA at many levels, certainly at a certain stage. And increasingly, even people who've never interfaced, not literate, you give them some sort of a technological device, they can figure it out pretty fast. Is it something that could change the way people are trained and educated in India very fast indeed?
I completely agree, because I have a lot of friends who have kids, and most of those kids cannot read the alphabet. But if you give them an iPhone or an iPad or a computer, they can't actually recognize the digits or the characters that they're pressing, but they know exactly what to press to make something happen on the computer. And most of the kids, I'm sure people in the audience agree, most kids are actually teaching their parents how to better use technology. And I personally feel that
e-learning... It happens in all cases, I assure you.
Oh, absolutely. I personally feel that e-learning is going to completely revolutionize the way people are educated. For example, I spent 4 years at Stanford, and not even once did I actually use a piece of paper or a notebook to take notes. All the notes were taken always on a laptop, and now I'm sure people are moving towards the tablet. And after coming back from Stanford, I've been running computer security certification courses across 100 cities in India, completely using the e-learning platform. So you have people in tier 3 or tier 4 cities like Warangal or E-Road who are actually coming to retail outlets or using broadband internet connection at home and accessing these course lectures through either video conference or VoIP platforms or just online forums or online chat channels. I think technology is totally going to change the way people are educated or education is imparted.
Mr. Khandelwal, we heard what you said, that there is a vast body of unskilled workers whom this is not going to affect. Is there an intermediate layer which could find their lives being changed by e-learning and new technological innovations, or are you somewhat skeptical?
I'm skeptical, Vikram, because that's maybe because I'm too close to this very large number of people who come into the manual, unskilled labor market. But certainly it does inspire confidence and give people skills. To my limited experience, it's not still clear how that will impact their livelihood in future, okay? Especially in the sectors that I mentioned, okay? Where the demand for unskilled manual workforce is still very large. So where is that going? Are we going to have less number of bricklaying workers in future? Are we going to have less number of unskilled construction workers in future? That supply will still remain. And how is that large number, 150 million in all, how does that interface with technology? How does their life change with a pad or a tablet is still unclear to me.
I think that he is absolutely right. That really is a very, very big challenge. And those are the lost generations that we need to actually deal with as of today. What we are trying to do, and this has to be in collaboration with the private sector as well, but we have now an adult literacy program through which we are saying that you can get a vocational degree even if you are an adult. All you have to do is to come to the panchayat, come to the adult literacy center, and whatever skill you want, we will give you the necessary equipment to be able to equip yourself with that skill. Now, that requires, again, a social transformation, that adults would actually, find time from their jobs and go to the center and say, we want to be skilled in this area, we don't think that we want to improve our skills. And of the 70 million that we're going to try to train in the next 5 years, 60 million of them are going to be women. And he's not talked about women. See, there's a lot of market out there of women who need skills, who want to be empowered with skills, and they have nowhere to go. So I think the complexity of the problem is huge, and we have to deal with the issue at different levels. There will be people who will access technology, they will be empowered. There will be people who will, even if they wish to access technology, will not access technology because of the nature of the job that they are doing, and nature of vocation they have. So we need to empower them differently, in different ways. Now, there again, I think the market and the employer will have to play an important role. How that will happen and how that it will work itself out is something that we'll see in time.
Right. Mr. Pawar, before I move away from the technological question, you've tried these experiments, haven't you? The hole-in-the-wall type experiments where you're exposing people to technology who've never used it before to see how fast and how quickly they can adopt. What have been your findings?
Well, there the problem we were trying to look at was to push this argument that if you look at people who can afford to buy a computer and learn, that's one category, they will learn. Then those who can come in to a class, either pay a full fee or get subsidy can learn, because they come into a class at least. Now, what about the 20-30 million who don't even go into a class? There's no teacher. So there we were trying to say that how intuitive can interfaces be so that kids in small groups, can they collaborate and learn? And there's strong evidence that that's possible. So that will deal only when you're dealing with information and some simulation, and perhaps as broadband improves, you can visualize and you can do simulation of many of these physical jobs. But I think the question, the real problem which we will visualize and see is that if you look at the pyramid, you look at the top 1/4, roughly, will find a way to manage. Lower one-fourth, perhaps they have so many fundamental problems that this may not be a big preoccupation. It's a huge chunk in the middle. So how do we create infrastructure so they can come in, and how do we finance it? So in the skills mission, when we were looking at this number of 500 million, our concern was on a couple of things. One is that how do we build a capacity to deliver? What is the demand, the supply side? So if you say we need government to do everything, I think we all are agreed that both the capability and the funding of that is going to be an issue. If you want that non-government actors to come in, then how do you build a model? You want to build public-private, how do you build a model? So the issues there are how do you deal with a very large number of people who may not be able to finance their education? And so the ideas there were about building capability to fund a student. So some of the ideas we looked at were, one is that put money in the hands of the student rather than the institution. So that when a student makes a choice, then you have competition at work, which will get better and better quality of delivery at reducing costs. So that was one principle we looked at. Then we said, how do we make skills fungible? And how do we make them bankable? How can I get a skill and benefit from that? So some of the ideas that Minister talked about about equivalence and the skill credits. So you make them marketable and fungible and bankable. Some of those policy changes, and then government putting money in the hands of students. We do it for other things. We do it for Narega. Now we may have things which go into the hands of learners. So once we do this, that the learner has a choice, then from the supply side will come a lot of options. So the money has to flow into competing ventures which are getting more and more efficient. And that business model innovation is as important in my view as the technology usages. And so I think that part, at least for the services area, there's great clarity on how it can be done. But for a brick kiln maker and so on and so forth, I think there the issues also are the lab for that is actually more expensive if you have to do physical work. So the cost of delivering that learning is higher. So how do you finance the student, or how do you fund the student so you can go to such a lab and pay, and it's viable for the entrepreneur who's doing it? Those are, I think, some questions which are lying unanswered at this time.
Mr. Sibal, I do want to just turn to the bottom half of the pyramid. And, while e-learning and tablets and all of that are very fine, some of the statistics in the way, for example, take girl children. The fact is that so many girl children drop out of school. Maybe half of them are dropping out of school because of something as simple as not having toilets, separate toilets for girl children in schools. Now, the complexities and the problems in areas like this are very far removed from technology. How do we first ensure that we can deliver that basic level of fundamental education?
But that's exactly why we have the Right to Education Act, which prescribes all these things. For example, in 3 years from now, that is April 1, 2010, by April 2013, every school must have 2 toilets, one for girls and one for boys. That's the prescription under the Act. The pupil-teacher ratio has to be 30. You can't be teaching 100 children. That's a prescription under the Act. Each teacher must have a classroom. That's a prescription under the Act. Each teacher must have a certain stipulated statutory qualification, and if you don't acquire it in 5 years, the teacher is out of the job. That's a prescription under the Act. Nature of infrastructure, quality of infrastructure is prescribed. Now, all that is there, but again, it's not the central government that can do it on its own. The state government has to be participating in it. We've made the school management committees, 75% of the school management committees are going to be manned by the community whose children go to school. And of those 75%, 50% are going to be women, which means the mothers whose children go to that school will actually make sure that the teacher teaches, will make sure that the prescriptions under the Act, which are mandated, are followed. So I think that requires a societal effort, and we are actually Shiksha Ka Hak Abhiyan, which I just launched the other day, the Right to Education movement. For 1 year, we're going to take this message to every household in the country. But I come back to the issue that he raised. Take, for example, construction. You're going to have an investment of $1 trillion in the construction industry in the next 5-7 years. Now people are going to need skills in construction. Now, it's the private sector which will have to take it forward. They'll have to take the adults. They'll have to skill them. They'll have to invest in those skills because it's part of their whole strategy to make money, because there's the investment opportunity. So I think part of the problem will be solved by the market, part of the problem through state intervention, part of the problem through the initiation of the individual himself, that he wants to be empowered. So I think there's a multiplicity of factors which will hopefully make this happen. But it's a big challenge.
Mr. Khandelwal, the Right to Education Act and the provisions, there are those provisions in the Act which could perhaps ameliorate some of what I was saying, but is it going to be implemented on the ground? Will all states be able to do it, or is it still 10 years away before all of this happens?
You know, the framework is in place. The infrastructure is actually remarkably good. The software, which is teacher motivation, quality of education, scholastic achievement by children, retention of the weaker, poorer categories of children in schools, those are the big challenges that need to be attended to. Failing which, this trigger from villages to cities will continue to happen, which is the case in several heavy out-migration areas. So I think we have the framework really in place now, and if some dedicated the kinds of provisions and programs we have now ahead of us for ensuring better quality schooling, that becomes a incentive, provides an incentive for kids to stay in school for a longer period and therefore to be skilled while they're still within the ambit of an institution, that can certainly make a change.
I've heard some in industry saying, and especially this is now at the unskilled end, that actually NREGA has had an unintended consequence. It's not that simple anymore to get workers as it once used to be, because a lot of workers are just, they've got NREGA, they can stay on in the villages, without necessarily doing that much work, they're just staying back. Now, I don't know if this is true or this is not true, but have you got that feedback as well?
Well, yes, there are. I've read a lot of pieces in newspapers, and we nowadays rely only on newspapers. So,
not on TV channels.
So that's.
What do you have against TV channels?
Well, on a more serious note, you see, the country has to address complex problems at various levels. If you do not have the buying capacity in place in the rural sector itself, you're not going to generate the kind of impetus in the economy that you want. It's absolutely imperative that your villager, your ordinary man, has the buying capacity to buy those goods which are going to actually be the engine of growth in the market. So I think, and of course at the same time try and acquire skills, because the whole purpose by NREGA is not that you just sit at home and get the minimum wage, but also that you actually acquire a skill and you do some social work. Do some water management or other works that you, and in that process acquire skills. And there's a lot of dialogue in the government that NREGA should be opened up to the acquisition of skills as well, of a multifarious nature of skills. So I think that as long as the government moves forward in that direction, there will be capacity building at that level, at the bottom of the pyramid, and there will be also enough liquidity with those people so that they can be the engines of growth as they move forward.
Mr. Chandrasekaran, have you heard this from your colleagues in other sectors of industry, the construction business, real estate and others, that NREGA is causing them to have serious problems in getting enough workers now?
No, I don't have any data point on NREGA, but I do want to make a point on the 150 million workers that Mr. Khandelwal referred to. First of all, I appreciate the depth of the problem. But when we say that there is a technology intervention, I think it is not a uniform intervention. We cannot assume that technology intervention is all about tablet and e-learning and so on and so forth. And that will happen at some level, because especially 4G is going to be there pretty soon, and we are going to be fully connected. Billion people are going to be connected. So there is a huge amount of content that will be created, and that will happen to some strata of the society.
People don't realize that one of the largest training centers in the world is actually YouTube. And you'll be surprised to see young people or young kids who do not know how to tie shoelaces. They just go to YouTube and search for it, and they see a video and they actually learn. Or if people want to bake a cake, they go to YouTube, search for a video, and they actually bake a cake. So I disagree that e-learning is only limited to computer/IT technologies. If, for example, when I was in college, I didn't know how to actually, take a nail and put it into the wall. So I actually watched a video, and it is nothing to do with computers and nothing to do with IT at all. And if you look at the mobile penetration in India, The average person in rural India does not have a television, definitely does not have a computer at home, but they probably have a cell phone with them. And if you talk to any cell phone content company in India, they will tell you, and I'm sure if there's somebody honest, you can comment on that, they will tell you that majority of their business in terms of video downloads or song downloads or any kind of educational downloads is coming from tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities. The people in urban India are not using their mobile phone as purely entertainment devices. They actually they have other sources of entertainment. But people in rural India are actually making use of their cell phone a little bit more innovatively, even though they have very cheap, basic cell phones.
No, let me just sorry, I want to intervene here. First of all, let's not be carried away by numbers. At the moment, there are 890 million people in this country who use mobile. There are 890 million mobile phones. But I think not more than 500 million use them, because many people have more than one mobile phone. So there are obviously, therefore, if you take those numbers to be correct, 700 million people in India who still don't have a mobile phone. That's almost, much more than the population of Europe as a whole. So I think mobile penetration is not as much as we make it out to be. Okay, that's the honest truth, and we should tell it to the public of this country. Number two, when mobile goes 3G, the cost of the equipment will be much greater, right? And the cost of the devices are much greater. So a person who can afford a mobile phone, even within the 500-600 million who have it, can afford a mobile phone for voice telephony, will not be able to afford it for 3G till the cost of those equipment comes down. So I think it's a complex issue. It's not so easy. Yes, it's an opportunity, but the penetration that is expected has not happened, will not happen for a while. And I think what Khandelwalji said is a real problem in our country, and we need to address it, and we can't just rely on technology alone to address that problem.
Okay, Mr. Khandelwal, let me just get Mr. Chandrasekaran to finish his thoughts.
So the intervention is not about mobile phones. We run a program for what we call as a functional literacy or adult literacy. It is for women, uneducated women in the rural areas of this country. And the intervention is not for these women to use any technology device. It is about having courseware, which you can give it to NGOs, and having an information system by which you know who these people are and what kind of skills they need. And then you go to the villages, in their place, how do you impart training? It's about how you can make a difference for them to become better at what they are doing. It is not about replacing their job with a technology or a tool. So the intervention is a completely different kind. When I say technology, it's not all cool stuff.
And if you take the entertainment sector, for example, there are such huge opportunities in the entertainment sector. We haven't even looked at them. The market hasn't looked at them. Yeah. If you look at our Navodaya Vidyalaya schools, which are residential schools in the rural areas, and the kind of cultural richness and the kind of wealth that those institutions have and tribals in our countries have, that's not even been looked at by the market. So I think we need to have different kinds of strategies. Those are enormous skills which we don't use.
Mr. Khandelwal, I just want to get you in on the NREGA question that I was just asking. What sort of an impact has that had? Is it making people less likely now to leave the villages, to go to factories, go to urban centers, or is it not having that sort of an impact?
You're okay with no, right?
Whichever, I'm just asking. You got the answer.
What it has done, it has established a certain wage aspiration. Okay, people know that there is a minimum that they can earn if they stay back. However, it has not substituted the need for going out and finding more work to do. It has certainly provided work, at least from Rajasthan, for example, for women. Large numbers who are now able to work closer home. Not very productively. The average wage rate is still low, and the number of days that they're employed are still not 100. But it has certainly created a certain aspiration of wages. However, the flow, I just wanted to take the cue from Mr. Chandrasekaran, and I think he's very right. The technology is also information. And if we can actually clear information asymmetries, in the labor market, for example, then it will actually help people feel more motivated to be skilled. why is it that large numbers of young people who come into the market actually don't want to be skilled? They prefer to be manual construction workers rather than be plumbers or carpenters or tile fitters, because they know that skills will not be rewarded adequately in the sector that they are coming into. Some of these sectors are so imperfect that long-term stints in these sectors do not adequately reward people. There is no long-term social security, wages are still poor, there is still indentured labor, there is all forms of appalling labor practices, and until those are actually removed, what is the incentive to be skilled?
Mr. Joerres, is that a valid point?
It absolutely is, and we see it in our business all of the time. The informal labor market is actually a major threat to upskilling and others. You had asked earlier, though, about data. We ran a survey of 40,000 employers throughout the world, and we do it every year, and we've done it for the last 6 years. In 2010, 16% of the employers in India said they were having a hard time finding talent. In 2011, it was 67%, second only to Japan, which Japan, as we all know, has some of the most difficult demographic challenges. So there's multitudes of issues that are going on here to try to get those people that are in the system into a job. One of the things we did locally here that astounded me, the amount of success, is while they were in technical school or while they were in university, we worked with companies and said, what do you want? And we went into the schools and started practically training them before they graduated, and their efficacy rate that went into the company improved dramatically, almost double the amount of the people that were now successful. So it's not just the big ideas, it's sometimes those small ideas that can move the people through the system by just a little bit of a holding of their hand.
Just one question, that with unemployment now running at about 9% or so in the US, and the situation could get even worse, there's no clear sign of joblessness coming to an end out there. Are we going to see more and more talent moving to India from other countries? Is that a real problem? I mean, not just reverse migration of Indians coming back, but others just saying, why can't we find a job when there's some sort of growth taking place in India?
This is one of the major opportunities for India. High-skilled workers and also skilled workers within the skilled trades go to where opportunity is. Right now, the opportunity in the West is not as strong. What we hear in our U.S. operations, there are many people walking in and saying, how can I enjoy some of the growth happening in Asia? And it's not just Indian wanting to come back, it's just a really smart programmer graduating from Carnegie Mellon saying, where can I get the best job? And as the brand of India, which is so important, it must be an employer brand, is secured more, you will find that the brain drain that has happened in India going the other way will start to reverse if you can improve that brain drain.
Ankit, is that something that you're already seeing? I mean, you were at Stanford and you came back here. Is that something which you see a lot of your friends, others who are outside who went, and our generation, a lot of people went out, most of them starting to come back?
So I actually went to Stanford. I was class of 07, and from India in my class there were 10 students who joined Stanford, and as of now we are in 2011, 8 out of the 10 people are actually already back in India, and out of the 8, 5 of them have started their own businesses, and the remaining 3 have joined big banks in India. So they could have easily gotten $100,000 per year kind of job right out of Stanford in New York, but they preferred to come back to India because they felt that that is where all the opportunity is. In fact, talking about myself, I was actually a senior at Stanford with 6 months left to graduate, which is when I decided to take 1 year off, and I decided to come back to India, and I set up a consulting business. So I think India is at every nation has a life cycle of growth, and India is at a point where we are going to see phenomenal growth, at least in my lifetime or in the lifetime of people of my generation. And it's just amazing that not only, forget about India, even students from other countries who were studying at Stanford in my class, most of them have actually gone back to their respective countries.
So Sibal, I took almost that same decision about 20 years before he did, but in my case I also came back from Stanford, but in my case there were only I think 2 people, or 1 or 2 of us who came back, and the rest stayed on in the US. So there is this change that's happening.
Well, I went to the East Coast to study, and I was only one who went back, and I came back.
So there you are.
I'm talking about 1980, so 100% success. We're back in 1980.